Hi, welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, it's a little late night chat. After making a video about the Jewish nation or the Jewish race and their impacts on the world, I thought about the Americans, and Americans, love them or hate them, boy, they are a huge influence on the world right now. You could go, for some of the American artists, you could go almost anywhere in the world and they would have heard of, say, Michael Jackson. You could ask anybody in the street, they would have heard of Michael Jackson. There is a special quality about being American which almost has nothing to do with your origin. America is a unique, obviously it goes without saying that it's an incredible country with so much variety. You could actually get in an RV and you could do the Flying Dutchman. You could travel the roads of America for the rest of your life and lead a life of incredible variety and riches in terms of scenery and what you could see, and the variety would be incredible. So it goes without saying that it's an incredible country, but there's something about being American. Now, when I came, and it happens once you get to America, I've heard it said many times on this channel by comments of people saying, don't take your Filipina to America, she'll change. And actually it is true. It's not across the board. Obviously not every Filipina is going to become Americanized in a negative way. That's not actually always true, but it has been known to be true, and there is a change that takes place when you go to America which is almost indefinable. America, I heard it said when I was in Florida, I heard it said that America is the only place in the world, it's the only country in the world where you can go as an immigrant, work hard, do your best, raise a family, buy a house, and just live the life of being an American. And after a period of time, probably 4 or 5 years, you could take citizenship, and you could walk out of that place where you swear in and you could say, I'm American, and people, the other people around you, the Americans around you, would accept you. Now, you could go to China and you could spend the rest of your life and the next 2 or 3 lives trying to be Chinese, and it won't happen. Maybe to an extent in the UK you could, but it's America that is such an incredibly special place, and it's special in many ways. The names that they have, just look at the songs. I left my heart in San Francisco. There's no way that you could go to the UK and pen a song, no matter how beautiful, that says, I left my heart in Wolverhampton. It just wouldn't happen. So we're looking at something which is almost indefinable. Something happens to people when they go to America. Some of it's good and some of it's bad. That's why my title is Americans, Love Them or Hate Them. Now, it's a big country, so everything in some way or another gets bigger, and that includes how you talk. So you talk bigger, you talk louder. It just seems to be the way that it is, and this is not a talk about judging. This is just a talk about making an observation. If you go, I remember saying once, as an example, that when I came back from America, being used to hearing people talk in a louder voice, in a naturally louder voice, not shouting, and I got back into London, and part of my trip to get home back to the house, I went on the Underground, and I went on the Underground, the tube, the subway, and it was packed. It was packed with people, and even though it was packed, I could still hear the rustle of newspapers. People sitting there and they're reading their newspaper like this, and I could hear the rustle of newspapers because things are quieter. If you go into a restaurant in England, you will obviously hear this because you can't hear the conversation of the people on the next table. In America, if you go into a restaurant, if you tune out in a particular way, if you can directionally tune your hearing, you'll be able to hear the conversation of almost every table. They speak louder. So that's one thing. But there's something about the way that Americans do things which it's uniquely American. It's American. You can't... The Japanese have started to do the big trucks. Now these are the full-time trucks, and they've taken a leaf out of the book of Americans and their design. In fact, probably for a lot of the trucks that you see, they are designed for the American market, and probably they've gone to a design studio in America in order to get the finished design. And then they go back, Japanese will go back and they'll make it in their own uniquely, in many ways, superior way, and they'll turn out a beautiful product. But the idea of these trucks in which everything is so perfectly done, almost like a Rolls Royce inside. You can go, and I spoke to a man outside McDonald's once in America, and he was stepping out of what was obviously a brand new truck, and I went over to him and I said, "I have to say, sir, that this is a beautiful truck." And he gave me a little look at it. AC, full leather, beautiful stereo, central locking, automatic wipers which were intermittent, and just everything. It had every conceivable extra. What we would have called, in England they'd call it an extra. Well, what are the extras? In America they'd say accessories. So it was accessorized to the hilt, and it was beautiful. And it was a truck. Well, in America, in the UK, a truck is just a truck, you know. Now, of course, they're getting the American trucks, so that's something that they're beginning to get used to, and they've started to emulate. But look at the other things which are uniquely American. Harley Davidsons. The Harley Davidson bike has always been to me, the ultimate American icon. Cops on their Harley Davidson bikes were always a unique American thing. What else? Well, the super trucks. What about Bigfoot? Who in the world could have come up, but the Americans could have come up with Bigfoot? But they didn't. Look at what they used to do. They were flying through the air and landing, and in the early Bigfoots they were crashing out the suspension, and then finally they started putting transmissions out of tanks and stuff like that. They're not ordinary cars anymore. Look at movies. Look at how movies in America have their own way of doing things, and they were very much leaders. That's why you got Hollywood, the whole idea of a Hollywood starlet. Back then they used to employ these so-called starlets and upcoming actors, and they'd employ them as if they had a job, and they could be farmed out to operate for another studio. no extra pay, and not have any say in the kind of movie they made. Things changed quite a lot, and some of the early American stars, celebrities, had a great deal to do with that. Look at the music scene. If America didn't create anything else other than jazz, what an incredible contribution that would be to life on Earth. They created jazz. Where else could you have Louis Armstrong? And you've got Louis Armstrong, whose origins were in the streets of New Orleans, I think, and he worked for hookers, and the whole thing of jazz and how you take a tune and everybody else continues to play the chords and you play an improvised melody on top of what everybody is doing. So actually this whole tune is being played again, but without the melody, and then you as the soloist create an on the spot, in the moment melody which is uniquely yours. That's jazz, and it has to be united in that special way. It has to swing, it has to really jive. A lot of sayings which are no longer applied. You can't say with it, you can't say. I remember that when I was a musician we used to say, oh, it was really swinging, and then some comedian got hold of that expression and completely ruined it for the rest of us. Then we couldn't go along and say, oh, it was swinging, because we'd be emulating this comedian. So you had all of these things that came from America. Harley Davidson, muscle cars, super trucks, movies, jazz, and with it came this extra confidence. And I remember somebody telling me a joke about when the Americans first came to England in any kind of force was in World War II, and the Americans, the powers that be in the American services recognized that the English, with their more reserved way of behaving, might not take too well to somebody coming from, say, Brooklyn or, I don't know, Chicago or Detroit. So they were advised to behave very well and to be very polite. And the story that I was told was that in an American serviceman was traveling on a train. The train pulls into a small station, and in that moment, this is when there were no corridors in the trains. They were all just one way in, one way out, and it was just, each one was a self-contained little cylinder that you travel in. And the American is sitting there, and this lady, a duchess kind of lady, imperious and demanding, got into the compartment, and she had a small dog with her, a Pekingese, and she had a suitcase, and she was, the American, of course, extremely polite as they were, immediately says, "Ma'am, let me help you with that." And anyway, he's getting the suitcase, and I think she's got a couple, and he's putting it onto the rack that's overhead where you sit. But nothing that he did could please the woman. And then finally she says to him, "Oh, hold Fifi," and she thrusts the Pekingese into it. By this time, of course, even the American, as polite as he is and under orders as he is getting really, really tired of it. And he reluctantly takes the dog, and the woman is fussing about getting herself sorted out, and the dog pees on his lap. And he's so furious in the end. He opens there's an open window, and he hurls the dog out of the window. the woman is just horrified, and she sits there in total silence. There was one other man is in the compartment, and he is a British colonel type with the moustache and the tweeds, and he's not said anything at all, and he's looking at his newspaper like this, and he looks over his newspaper like that, and he says to the Americans, "You Americans amaze me." He said, "You do everything wrong." He said, "You talk wrong. You drive on the wrong side of the road, and now you've thrown the wrong bitch out the window." So these little stories, of course, were quite common in the UK. In fact, my father-in-law used to say that what was said about the Americans was that they were overweight, overpaid, and over here, meaning the UK. So Americans, love them or leave them, they are an incredible, unique race of people, and once you're into the US and you've taken your citizenship, you're part of that race. In the meantime, I'm going to kill the next kid that says to me, "Kano, Kano." I'm not Kano, I'm British. And we'll deal with the British and their unique ways in another video. This is a foreigner here in the Philippines. Thank you for looking. Hope you will like, comment, subscribe, and possibly share. Bye for now.